Okay, welcome to the final package, lesson package 3, Food Resources Gateway 2. So for this part here, we will be looking at the effects of continuing intensification of food production. What are the pros and cons of doing this? Then we will also be looking at the final bit, what are the causes of food shortage then. Since we have looked at so many ways to increase food production, right? Why is it that there's still food shortage? Or why is it that it seems that we're still struggling with food shortage? So let's start with some benefits of increasing intensification of food production. Most tangibly, benefit will be you have more food, right? So when you have green revolution and all the other intensification methods that are put in place, you have increased yield from all these benefits. Okay, HYVs, mechanization, there's higher productivity, right? So when you have shorter or no fallow period, okay, you can continue to plant throughout the soil. Okay, the soil is not enough nutrients, you just add fertilizers. Okay, you have no pests attacking your crop. Your crop is total. The total amount produced is the total amount harvested. Then there's going to be a lot more food that's available. So that's a very big benefit. That's also why we continue to do it. Okay, the second reason why you continue to do it is because the farmers earn money. So when you have more yield, right, the farmers are able to then sell for more money and more income is generated. So it's a win-win-win situation, apparently. Okay, until this point, you see more food produced, farmers get more income, everybody's smiling. Okay, soil salinization is one problem then. It's not all good. So we're going to now look at a couple of problems. When you have soil salinization, what actually happens is once you do planting, right, and you do irrigation, okay, the minerals of the salts in water used in irrigation is left behind. So the plant actually draws out the water. It doesn't draw in the salt. It doesn't need the salt. So it absorbs the water. What is left behind is salt. Okay, so when you have the plantation continuing over years, right, 10, 15, 30, 40 years of planting on the same piece of land, what you end up with is a layer of salt that is on the upper layer of the soil. Okay, now when you have this saline soil that has got salt in it, over time, as the layer thickens, your crops will not be able to grow as well because they don't do as well in this kind of situation. And when you do fertilization when you do irrigation on it, right, and you add water to soil that's already highly saline, you will end up with water that's close to salt water. So plants do not do well in that. Okay, you're not planting mangroves here. So this is one key problem of increased use of irrigation. You actually create this situation where there's soil salinization. Right? If you want a little bit more details, right, you can go to the textbook. The textbook gives you a little bit more details about how soil salinization actually takes place. But generally, what is a must know is it's through the process of irrigation, is leaving behind salt particles that is used in the water for irrigation, and over time it gathers and forms this thick layer of salt. How can we do this? There are ways to manage the soil salinity, but why is it not done? It's because it's very expensive. So for most farmers in developing countries, the faster fix or quicker fix solution is to just move on, to abandon the land, leave nature to hopefully recover and recoup the land, create a fallow period, which is a duration of maybe 5 years where the land is not used for agriculture, allow nature to help you regenerate. Okay, that's well, of course, provided you have extra land. But if you don't, there are other ways of managing it. Okay, but it's costly and it's time consuming. That's why this is not often done by farmers. The second big problem is eutrophication. What is eutrophication? It's when you add chemical fertilizers into your farmland. So not all the chemical fertilizers are actually absorbed by the plants. Okay, we tend to overcommit because you do want to make sure all the plants get a fair share of it, right? So when rain comes, all this additional fertilizer is actually washed off into your drainage systems, which makes its way into water bodies, okay? Be it the sea or worse still, lakes and ponds. So these are fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, highly tuned to encourage plant life to grow. So when they introduce themselves into water bodies, the plant life that thrives on this additional nutrients is your algae. So you get algae blooms where a thick layer of algae actually covers your entire top of the water body. Okay, so when you have this happening, right, what will end up happening is you will kill off all the marine life in the water body, and your water body becomes toxic, okay, and it cannot be used anymore. Okay. Are there ways to do this? Yes, you can control the runoff from farms. You have public awareness campaigns not to overcommit to the fertilization. You can monitor chemical levels and then know when to stop certain farmers from continuing this. But all these things cost money, and all these things don't generate income for anybody. Okay, so unless your government is very vested in your water channels, the government will also not be interested in doing such measures to control or to reverse eutrophication. They will once again, in countries that have space, will just leave it to be abandoned. Okay, so what are the benefits and challenges that we've seen so far? The key benefit, I think, is increase in income and increase in crop yield. So is it a win-win? No, because through increase in technology, you do introduce a lot more chemicals into the environment, and this can have a long-term impact. So content recap, irrigation, how does it lead to salinization? Please remember the explanation for salinization is important. Okay, how has green revolution affected farmers? Is it a positive one for farmers? Is it a negative one for farmers? Please remember, if you're going to say that it's negative, right, then you have to come to terms with, then if it's negative for farmers, why do farmers still continue on this journey? Okay, so if I tell you not studying is negative for your results, okay, why would you continue to not study if you really know that yes, it's not good for my results? You wouldn't, right? You would take the logical stand and then start studying somehow, right? So when you're answering questions like this, logic must prevail. Okay, must remember, logic must prevail. So this is two photos that show you what eutrophication can look like. I will put in another video in the playlist of videos for you to watch about eutrophication and how bad it actually is in China. Okay, now having said that, China is not the only country that faces eutrophication. Okay, China has large scale farming that's done. They do use a lot of chemical fertilizers, and they do face annual eutrophication problems. It came to a point, the video I hopefully will find and put in is one about the Beijing Olympics and how the sailing center is covered in algae because of eutrophication. So moving on to the final bit of this package, if we are all in agreement that food intensity has increased food yield, why are there still food shortages then? Okay, so what are the causes of food shortages? Now there are four main areas that we can look at in terms of what causes food shortages: physical, political, economic, and social factors. Similarly, when you look at health and disease in the next chapter, you will also be revolving around these four main categories of factors. So physically, if we talk about climate change is a very real problem, and with climate change, what the farmers struggle with is their original crops that they were planting are no longer suitable for the new climate. Okay, remember we talked about climate change last year in Weather and Climate, where you talk about countries facing upwards of 2 degrees change in temperature. Now 2 degrees change may not be much for humans, okay, because we are able to tolerate quite a wide band of temperatures, but for certain crops, right, if you trigger a 2 degree change in the overall climatic condition or overall temperature, it may mean that it's too warm for them to flower, and as a result they will not bear fruit. And normally most of the times what we're eating is the fruit itself, okay, of what is being produced. If you want to grow more of the crop, you need the fruit to have the seeds. So when you have temperature change, water availability change, certain areas getting flooded by the sea, you are no longer able to plant what you could in the past. Okay, extreme weather, droughts, cyclones, heat waves, all these can lead to direct crop destruction. So imagine your rice plantation is almost ready to harvest, and your country is hit by a typhoon, which actually plots a path across your entire rice plantation. By the time the typhoon is done, 80% of the rice is gone. Okay, whipped up. The remaining 20% that's left, it's in bad shape, cannot be harvested properly. So that year you have zero crop yield, right? So what can cause food shortages? Extreme weather conditions. And with climate change, we are getting more occurrences of these extreme weather conditions, right? So this in total is a big problem. Okay, remember when we talked about increased temperature, who thrives? Pests thrives, insects thrive. So when you have pest outbreak, you will also lose large amounts of your crops, and this will in turn lead to food shortage. Now what you see in the picture here are locusts. We can find locusts in Singapore, but not in this kind of swarms. So in the playlist, you will also find a video about locust attack in Africa. Okay, locusts basically wipe out everything in its path. Okay, so pests like locusts are very destructive, and when they come in their swarm, they basically wipe out everything in their path. Okay, will they bite humans? If you are dumb enough to stand in front of a locust swarm, then yes, they will bite you. Okay, but most humans tend to react to pain, and then you will start running. Political causes when you have civil strife, internal war, civil war, um, destruction of your crop may happen because of attacks, because of bombings, because the farmers themselves are fearful for their lives, so they move away from areas of conflict. So this is another area where you can politically affect and lead to food shortage. If you have poor governance, okay, like the photos that you see here, okay, you have a leader who's incapable, who doesn't practice good leadership, like what you learn in social studies, so it doesn't prioritize what is needed for economic growth, for development of agriculture, okay, and then your people are, if number one, unable to plant their own crops, number two, also not rich enough to buy import products, you will have food shortage. Okay, poor governance. Okay, poster boy for poor governance is in the photo here, right? My friend Kim. Um, Rising demands, okay, economic causes of food shortage. If you have a certain developing country suddenly getting high DI, disposable income, and then triggering a growth of the middle income, and these are the ones who consume huge amounts of food, right? They are the ones who make the switch onto meat protein, okay, meat and dairy products, and then what will happen is your global food production output may not be able to catch up fast enough to the sudden rise in these demands. Okay, now you must understand whether there's a demand in these countries, right? The BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, they demand more of meat, of dairy products. Doesn't mean they consume everything that the demand is there for. So also remember that there's food wastage, okay, triggered by these particular countries as well. As you get more disposable income, as you move into the middle class, you don't just flaunt the fact that you have meat to eat, you flaunt the fact that you have choices of different types of meat to eat. Okay, but in the provision of choice, the unfortunate side product end product is you have waste. Cost of fertilizers is important. So when you have a sudden increase in these peripheral causes, fertilizers, transport causes, what it directly means is you will have food shortage, but not across the world. You will have food shortage in people who cannot afford these things. So poor LDCs and citizens in LDCs will not be able to afford when you have sudden spikes in costs like this. So what will they do? They will eat less. So for countries like them, because they cannot afford the food, they are unable to buy or unable to produce their own food, they will have food shortage in these areas. This does not affect DCs. When in the DC, if I were to tell you price of rice will go up by 10%, what do? You pivot to a cheaper version of the rice. Okay, because you have still ability to produce or to buy cheaper variants. Okay, is when you're already on the cheapest variant. I tell you price is going to increase, what will you do? You will eat less of that. Okay, so your quantity will decrease because you don't have choice to pivot. Okay, biofuels was a big problem about 10 years ago, where companies and scientists started realizing that you could produce certain crops and extract biofuel from them, okay, bioethanol from them, and these biofuels can be used to power motor vehicles, okay, machinery. So it was also a side effect of this push for environmental lower carbon footprint. So when you are looking at growing your carbon fuel, in the process of growing it, you're actually reducing the total amount of carbon that's produced because of it. Okay, oil palm, corn, these are all very common biofuel crops. But when you increase the demand for this, okay, what happens is the price of it will go up. Farmers will pivot to it, right? When they switch to biofuel crops, what are they switching from? They're switching from food crops. So you have less edible food crop, you will trigger food shortage. Why? Because the farmers will find it still more positive, more profitable to be growing biofuel crops. Okay, when will they switch back? When you have a point where the food crop now, because of scarcity, right, price goes up above biofuel crops, then the farmers will just switch back. Farmers actually don't care what they sell. Okay, they just care about earning the money. Okay, so remember, commercial farmers are not the nicest people in the world. Humans are generally like that. They are selfish. They have their underlying concerns, and for commercial farmers, their underlying concern is cash. So they will not be out there to sell what is good for the environment, sell what is good for you. They will be out there to sell what is good for them, what earns them most money. Social causes, okay, some locations, this is a very, very weak factor now. Lack of accessibility. There are very few places in the world that are so inaccessible that they cannot get access to food supply, so that as a result they get food shortage. It is increasingly very, very rare, but you still can find places like this in large countries. Okay, countries like Africa, countries like even in China, right, in rural parts of India where there are people who live in really, really obscure places. No power line, no roads, no paved roads, no train, no nothing. So for these people, if they have their subsistence farms fails, there's some problem with the subsistence farming, climatic change or whatever, and they get wiped out, they have very, very severe food shortage because there's no way to get food to them. Okay, distribution and storage, these are the key problems, key causes of food shortage now. It's not that we don't produce enough food, it's that the food that's produced, right, is either priced beyond the ability of these people to afford it, or is priced at a point where these people are unable to get to the food sources. So when you have inadequate logistics of food distribution and storage, you cannot then ensure that all the food that is produced is evenly distributed. So we've come to the end of part 3, okay, and I want to go back to the final slide here, this point here. I want to emphasize this once again. At this moment in human history, right, we are actually still producing more than enough food for the entire 7+ billion humans on Earth. Well, given that there will come a point in history, in humanity's timeline on planet Earth, where we will not produce enough, okay, where the total amount of humans we have is just too overwhelming. You will not be producing enough food for them. We are not at that stage yet. So the key cause of food shortage, right, you need to remember, you have to argue it along accessibility of food, right? Either your people are too poor, you cannot get the food, or you are unable to benefit from the increased productivity, okay, because you are too poor. So the key issue of why there's food shortage is you need to look at who is facing food shortage, right? The rich are never facing food shortage. The rich countries are never the ones who face food shortage. Within the country itself, the rich people in the rich countries are never the ones who face food shortage. It is distribution, it is affordability. So if you're poor, or you're living in a poor country, then there's still a high chance of you getting hit by food shortage, for now. Okay, so we have looked in total at the impact of intensification of food. Is all good? Okay, the causes of food shortages in this package here. So there will, like I mentioned in the earlier 2 videos, right, there will be a YouTube playlist that I will send out in teams. The YouTube playlist is actually open. If you scroll through the Eutrophication Singapore YouTube channel, you will find that YouTube playlist for food resources, right? You need to make sure that you watch every single last video in that playlist. That video playlist is the additional stimulus, additional examples, additional case studies for your complete learning of this this chapter here. Okay, so I will stop here. For your homework for package 3 is basically to go and complete watching the YouTube playlist. Do not do it in one sitting, you will go blind. Take some time throughout the next 2 weeks to look through all the videos. Okay, they're not videos produced by me, so they'll be pretty interesting, unlike my videos here. Okay, so with that, congratulations, you've come to the end of package 3.